Welcome to the Finding Magic podcast, where we explore themes of intuition, creativity and magic, as discussed in my book, Getting into the Flow. This helps us broaden our view of reality and understand how magic is created and sensed. In this way, we can realize our highest potential and live the best possible version of ourselves. In this podcast, there are 3 types of episodes. The Finding Magic interviews, where a guest tells me their story of magic and flow showing up in their lives. The Finding Magic insights, where I share an insight about magic and flow. And the Flowing Conversations, where I'm interviewed on TV, radio and or podcast shows. And this is a Flowing Conversations episode. So welcome to Flowing Conversation episode 6, where I have a wonderful discussion with Haider, and without any further ado, on with the interview.
What if you could unlock the extraordinary power within you? Join us on our Human Potential podcast as we explore the limitless possibilities, the Holy Trinity of mind, body and spirit. Discover easy-to-action tips, inspiring stories, and expert advice to help you tap into your highest potential and live a life of purpose and fulfillment. For a free transformational tool, go to soulful-awakening.com/free.
Hi guys, and welcome to a new episode of the Human Potential podcast. I am delighted to be joined by my special guest, Vincent Melling. Vincent, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much, Haider.
So look, let's dive into this because we're going to explore the realms of intuition, creativity, and the concept of flow. And before we do that, I'm curious, was there a pivotal moment in your life where you realized that there's more than meets the eye? And how did that realization shape the path you've taken since?
That's a really good question, Haider. And I think the answer goes back to a particular episode in high school. And I couldn't stand the high school that I was at for the last 2-3 years of my school life. And it was very regimented, very traditional. And there was a little kind of crack in the matrix, or the slip in the veil somewhere, because this book exposition came around, and it was one of those ones that goes from school to school, a book expo. And there were books in there that I am sure will be rejected out of hand by the school librarian as something to buy, and books about yoga and books about meditation. Now, this was, I guess, I'm going to give away my age, but sometime in the 70s. So in those days, we had got through that first stage where yoga and meditation, they were great. They were real outlier people. And the Beatles and everybody that went to Rishikesh to some extent had made it, yeah, you're still on the fringe, but you're acceptable fringe. And that's what really grabbed my eye. It got me interested in those subjects, and I guess it all culminated when I finally got to university, and in university I took up transcendental meditation. I thought, I've arrived, I'm back where all those cool people were, and I really loved it for a couple of months, and then I wasn't seeing things change in my life. That was the first calling. And then I got a second calling many years later when my kids were pretty much grown up, and I really got a sense that there was something missing in my life, and it was of a spiritual nature. And I'd, even through the long years of after I left transcendental meditation, I still had an interest in anything that was out of the ordinary, anything that suggested that the narrative on how the world wasn't quite right. And so I held that interest, and it came to a head probably about 13, 14 years ago when I ended up going to Mind, Body, Spirit Festival, and that kind of started a big shift in my life. So does that answer your question?
It certainly does. And I want to explore this theme of transcendental meditation. Firstly, what is it? And secondly, I want to link it to this aspect of just because we pursue a spiritual practice, it doesn't necessarily mean the end result of our lives change. And it sounds like you were an example of that, because you actually just said you started doing this meditation and nothing much was changing. So talk to me about this experience with meditation and the linkage to how it was impacting your life, or how your life wasn't progressing as you would like to have.
Yeah, I think the people that were in those days promoting transcendental meditation were setting various expectations about how things should shift, not necessarily in the external, but in what happened during the meditation. And the letting go of mindiness, the coming into real spaces of emptiness, ultimately things with the more advanced meditators, there was the next steps of things like cosmic consciousness, Christ consciousness, flying, which is a kind of bouncing around. And one or two of the people that I was talking with in that group had done that sort of work. But it was like I wasn't getting to what they had told me was first base with the meditation. And at that time, they were like the only voice out there about what meditation should look like. And when it didn't look like what they said it would look like for me, that's why I gave it away. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, sure. So just this theme, I want to explore this theme because on this podcast, we explore human potential and transformation and giving people tools and techniques and awarenesses that will facilitate self-actualization, right? Meaning,
yes,
I do this practice and things change for me.
Yes.
And also to clarify that sometimes when we do these spiritual practices, things don't necessarily change. And I want to explore why they don't change. That's what I'm getting to. So
yes. So
why didn't it change for you when you engage in this practice?
Now, there's a very good point, Haider. I'm not saying that it didn't change. What I'm saying is that my end result didn't match the expectation that was set by my mentors.
Great.
Okay,
so that's really nuanced. That's a really nuanced point.
Yes. And what I've learned perhaps over the past 10, 13 years is that things shift. They can shift fast. Often they shift slowly for us, but they're all the time cumulative and they're all the time building. And where I have taken my practice is in two directions. After trying a number of different methods and tools, I've settled on the first thing that I do now is a practice called shaking meditation. It comes out of Bali, and it's very physical, and it encourages the flow of subtle energy through the body to break up various energetic blockages that are in all the energetic systems in the body, in the chakras, in the organs, and so on.
So that's called shaking meditation.
Yeah, and it has become for me a practice that can be very joyful and very connected to spirit. So that's really beautiful. But it's taken a long while to get there, and there have been times that it's felt very much like hard work, and I've had a lot of resistance to it. And to this day, there are days that are really great, really connected, and other days that are, I don't want to do this. I've got to get on with it again. And the other practice is Kundalini Yoga. Now, Kundalini Yoga is interesting because compared to a traditional yoga class, a Hatha yoga class, or other classes of that lineage, a Kundalini yoga class covers more of what would traditionally be seen as yoga than perhaps the physical aspect. So we will usually start with some breath work, and then we'll do some physical yoga, and then we will do a meditation, which may or may not involve physical movement, and then we'll do yoga nidra. And so even when we're doing the physical work, we are called into a meditative space. Okay, so we're invited to do physical work, and I might demonstrate just a very simple thing that we do. And in Kundalini Yoga, we often use rhythmic movement as one way of doing it. It's not just stretching, but sometimes we use rhythmic movement. And one particular exercise we do is these sets of, we have kriyas. Kriyas are sets of individual exercises, or they can be just one exercise. But one of the exercises is called neck turn. So you will physically be turning your neck to your left and to your right. But as you're doing that, you inhale left and exhale right.
Right, you're demonstrating. So the benefits of this?
And then you meditate at the brow point. And then you add a mantra, Sat on the left, Nam on the right. And so there's all these extra levels of meditativeness that we bring into the yoga.
Okay,
Yeah.
So that makes sense, right? So you found two practices that resonate with you, and they're helping you in evolving your life. I want to talk about something you mentioned about the days that you don't feel like doing it, because we've all experienced that, right? I'm going through that right now myself. There's days where I'm just don't want to do my practices, my daily practices that I know are benefiting me. So what do you think it is in the human psyche that prevents us, I don't think prevents is the right word, that makes us not want to engage in practices that we know are good for us?
That's a really good question, Haider. And I know some people will answer it in terms of the beliefs we carry, the limiting beliefs, the assumptions, that sort of thing, and the power of our unconscious to pull us down. That's really a really interesting concept, the power of the unconscious, because no, it sounds very simple, but by definition, the unconscious is something that we're not seeing. And because we're not seeing it, it has power. And sometimes it just takes us a while to realize that we're not seeing something, or we're seeing something happen in the outside. I don't want to do this. Why is that? And it's because something unconscious is at work. But I also feel that it's not only the unconscious pulling us down, but just sometimes our energy levels and where we're at with that, and how we build and maintain our energy levels to be able to see an opportunity with enthusiasm, or see it as just another piece of the burden of daily life. I don't know if that makes sense, but
that makes perfect sense. And thank you for answering that in the way you have, because I actually am asking that from a personal point of view. Like I mentioned, I just didn't want to do my practice this morning, and I'm like, okay, what's present for me here? And you're right, it's the unconscious. And the fact that I've done lots of work on bringing consciousness to my life, there is this element of unconscious that is always operating, that does go unseen, undetected, and it does influence the choices we make. So that's a really good awareness that we're giving people. When is your unconscious playing out in your day-to-day life? And in the moment you don't want to do something that you know that's going to benefit you, you get to take a breath and say, okay, what is the unconscious choice that I'm making here? So moving the conversation on, Vincent, I really want to talk about your work, right? And a lot of your work is to do with intuition, flow. Let's start with intuition. What do you mean by intuition?
To me, intuition is receiving information that I would not readily have access to. Sometimes intuition does align with stuff that we know, and it gives us a clarity on what we already know. But sometimes it brings us information or insights that we hadn't thought of or hadn't been able to put into words as clearly as intuition gives it to us. In terms of how I see the model, it's as if there is like out there's like an internet cloud of all possible information. And when we connect with our intuition, we're like dialing up and dialing into that. And we're creating a connection where we've got that and where it can come through. It's not that we're not connected, because I feel we're always connected, but we're like turning on the tap. That's my metaphor for it.
Okay, so there's this world of information that we can tap into at any moment. So my question is, okay, how do I do this? How do I tap into this information and utilize what I receive to benefit my life?
Okay, I think the first thing you've got to understand is that there is a wealth of information out there, and if you just turned on the tap and it all flooded in, you'd be overwhelmed and you wouldn't know what to do with it. The way that works is that we have to set an intention for what we want to get before we go in there. And most of the time we set the intention consciously. Sometimes we set the intention unconsciously, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So the way we do it is by coming to a state that in the work I do we call innocence. It's a state of very deep presence, and it's a state of it's almost a blissful state, and it's also a very relaxed state, because you need presence and you need relaxation in the body, and you need to feel good and feel that inner peace that's there in order to open up and come into a receptive place. It's like in our neurology, we can be in fight or flight, and then we're closed off to what can come in, and we're just trying to make our best in that situation. Then we can be open. Okay. And so it's achieving that openness in the neurology, in the mind, and everywhere, so that we can connect to intuition. Then we have the intention of what we need, and then it all works.
This is great, because I've got an idea that's suddenly come to me as you were talking about innocence. So there's a great Confucius saying. Confucius was a great Eastern philosopher from 3,000 years ago. Yeah. Maybe I made that up, but from the history. And he had a saying, right? And it went like this. It went, "Tell me and I may forget. Teach me and I may remember. Involve me and I will learn and understand." So as you're talking about innocence, and as you're talking about accessing this information, this intuitive information, and setting an intention to go and receive this information, I'm like, why don't we do something right now in terms of me and my intention? So are you up for showing my audience how we actually do this?
Yeah, so can I just preface it with a couple of remarks?
Sure.
I did say that you need intention. Now, sometimes you can broadcast that intention through your vibration. And what I mean by that is that, particularly, I find this happens for me when I'm writing books, when I'm writing songs, that I can do some work on the song or do some work on the book and then walk away from it. And then when I'm out on a walk, stuff just begins to drop in. That's intuition at work in that way. Yes, we can do some work on you. One of the questions that we sometimes get asked is, how can we get information about whether or not this natural disaster will happen, this person will win an election, there's all these sorts of issues that are going on in the world. And where I come from with that, and you'll see people online on YouTube, there are psychics, there are channels that are bringing through this information. But for most of us, we begin to see that those are preoccupations of the mind. They're not where the real value of intuition is. The real value of intuition is finding what's true for your higher consciousness, for your soul, for your journey on the earth, and not for not for finding out whether or not my football team's going to win next week. The lottery numbers are that sort of thing.
So there's an integrity to it, right? That you're talking about.
There are boundaries. There are boundaries to doing what's really useful for us right now, and working on a client or working in a mutual help group. That's perfectly good. That's within the boundaries of what we can achieve with this version of intuition.
Yeah. So my intention, and thank you for clarifying that, because people often get confused with psychic power, intuition, wanting and needing to predict the future. And like you say, that just comes from your ego, your mental concepts that don't necessarily serve the collective. And intuition is about serving the collective, like you alluded to. So my intention for doing this exercise with you right now, and as you were speaking, I was like, this podcast is here to serve people, right? And it's a creation from the divine. That's how I term it. And the more exposure this podcast receives, and the more people that listen to it and view it, I know there's a kind of ripple effect of elevating human consciousness, which again is one of the intentions of this podcast. So my intention for this podcast is for it to go viral, which means millions of views and downloads, etc. So my choice is to use my intuition to give me the direction and pathway of how to grow and make this podcast viral. Does that make sense?
Yes, but it's can I be honest with you? Feels a little bit long. What you want is for the podcast to be viral.
Yeah, so I was giving you some context, right?
Yeah, some context.
So what I'm actually doing, Vincent, is I'm taking the role of someone who is interested in this work, who's coming to you as a complete novice and saying, Vincent, this is what I want. Yeah. Give me your help. Give me your guidance. Give me your knowledge in how to do this. Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes perfect sense. And how will having it go viral make you feel?
How will it make me feel? It will make me feel fulfilled and satisfied, like I'm living, like I'm fulfilling the purpose of the podcast.
Yeah, great. Fantastic. Yeah. Good. So what do you want to do from here? You want to tune into that?
So let's tune into the next steps of making this a reality.
Okay, let's tune into the end result of it first. Now, what we're going to do is we're coming to innocence. Now, for those people that do not have the training to know what innocence is, it's just a state of, you can get close enough with a state of deep presence. So just sitting with a straight spine, just inviting the body to soften, and inviting the breath to slow. And we'll just spend a moment or two here.
I'm going to close my eyes. And those of you who are listening on audio, I'm going to encourage you just to follow along Vincent's guidance and see if you can invoke this state of innocence that Vincent's going to guide us through.
Okay. But please don't close your eyes if you're driving a car or operating heavy machinery. And I know that I often listen to podcasts when I'm driving. So you may have to come back.
Thank you for that. Jeez, don't want any lawsuits.
Yeah. Okay. So we're sitting with a straight spine. The body's softening. We're lengthening the breath, and that shifts the nervous system from fight or flight into parasympathetic, into opening up. And we're noticing what's going on with our breath as it comes in, as it goes out. And then for those of you that have done this before, you can take one last little step into a state of innocence. First of all, we're going to imagine a circle in front of us, and we're going to put in that circle Haider's end result of the podcast going viral and in feeling really satisfied and fulfilled in creating that end result. And we'll step into that circle and just receive intuitively whatever's there to be received. And the first thing that I got when I stepped in was that this is a very joyful place. I'm going to make this a very quick reading because we're on a podcast, a very joyful place and a place of great satisfaction. And yeah, there's a certainty there that you've done it, that you've been able to make this happen. And ooh, when I say ooh, that's a little bit of intuition at work for those of you that are listening or watching. Yeah, the fact that not only, very often we think about how we feel, but how are other people seeing it? And you're being seen by all the people that it's gone viral to. And that is, that's a real cause for celebration. Yeah. How did you see this end result, Haider?
Yeah, so the moment I stepped into that circle, I saw and I heard fireworks, and a lot of them. So it's interesting that you said how it was making people feel like the celebration. We associate fireworks with celebration. So there was a celebratory nature, and it filled the mural of the sky. So it was vast. It was vast. Yeah. So that's the imagery that I got. So are we saying that's my intuition now at play, Vincent?
Yeah, that's your intuition now at play. And because you have done some of this work, you're used to receiving intuition by means of symbols. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, remember that symbols are the language of intuition, and for good reason, because you can get a lot more information packed into a picture than you can simply through, sometimes I hear words, but simply through getting words, it's sometimes not enough. And pictures give you so much more information. And if the pictures move, you get exponential levels of information from the way that those pictures move in your intuitive mind's eye. Okay.
So now this is really good because we're taking people through a process, right? And I get a lot of newcomers who are new to this podcast. So I want to again adopt the role of the student, the blank mind, and explore this idea. Okay, so I've stepped in this circle. I've received this imagery. I've received words. How else can I receive this intuitive information as I step into this circle?
That's a really good question. And you have found somebody myself who I don't always get lots of bright Technicolor pictures. Sometimes I don't. I don't always get movies. Sometimes I don't. Everybody's different, by the way. You may get one predominant form of receiving intuition. So some of you get visuals. Some of you get moving visuals. Some of you will hear things. Some of you will get information that's similar to hearing, but it's subtly different. It's getting specific words or keywords about what intuition is trying to tell you. Some of you will get a feeling, and most of the time you will get a feeling or sense the energy of what's coming in, even if you're getting visuals, even if you're getting a word, even if you're getting something that you're hearing. Okay? So there are multiple ways of receiving the information. And sometimes you get more than one happening at a time. And sometimes the information shifts as you receive it. So you may see something as in a movie, or you may get a picture of something and then you can choose to walk around it and get a 3D image of it.
So we're talking about the subtleties of the information. Now, I want to, because I want people to get into this, right? I want to make it attractive. I want to encourage people to go and do this. Where can they go and practice this stuff? Because we've given them a little taster. And people might be like, okay, this sounds really interesting. And they may have done the practice and may have stepped into that circle, and they may have got those subtle energies and those subtle visions or the subtle words. And they're like, oh, cool. This is really cool. I want more of this. What's their next step to pursue this?
Their next step is to find somebody that will train them in the various steps of intuition. Now, I know you said we talk about my book at some stage, but what I do in the book is outline the various steps that we go through. The first step is innocence, where you learn to connect with intuition. Then we've already mentioned symbols and circles in our discussion this evening, and those are the next two steps where we begin to receive intuitive information and practice receiving that intuitive information. Now, there are a few people around that are teaching this kind of work on a regular basis. William Whitecloud and Natural Successor One organization. I also teach it as part of a collaboration called the Academy of Intuitive Mastery, or AIM, so they can get it from there. And yeah, I'm not sure who else out of the lineage.
That's fine, Vincent, right? I just want to send people to you because you're talking about this and you're teaching this. So it's AIM, right? Yeah. We're going to put the link in the show notes so people can follow up, which is great. So let's move this conversation on, because now we've done the circle, right? We've dropped into innocence. You and I have both stepped into that end result, and we received this information. I got the fireworks. You got the whatever you got. Sorry, I've forgotten. What am I to do with this information now? What's my next steps?
Okay, so that is step 1 of 3. Okay, we've looked at where your end result is. We need to look at where you're at now. We can do a quick circle of that if you want.
Okay, yep. Okay, yeah, let's do that.
Yep. And so because
we drop into innocence again,
are well practiced at this, we're going to drop straight into innocence. And yeah, when you do this work with me, we actually do an exercise of anchoring the state of innocence so that you can drop in at the drop of a hat. And we'll do a circle that just talks about the current reality of your podcast with respect to your end result. What's going on for you right now, both for the podcast and for you? Yeah, I'm getting a steady flow, but a small flow. And it's very peaceful, which is peaceful in some contexts are great, but when you want it to be viral, it's not where you want it to be. If you've got a small flow, you want floodwaters, you want a river. So that's the difference. That's what I'm seeing at the moment. Where you're at with it is, first of all, that you're very happy with what you've built. And having a podcast myself, I know the effort that it takes to create a podcast, to start getting interviews, to start to do all the editing and getting stuff up online. So congratulations, Haider. You're doing a great job here. And yet what I'm also getting at the same time of this is I'm actually feeling in current reality the hunger that you've got to take it to greater places, and also a little bit of powerlessness around, I don't know how to do this. I really don't know what's got to happen next. Okay, and where did you get to with where you're at the moment?
So that's great. Thank you for that reflection. And this is why it's so great to do it with someone who's trained in this, right? Because they're also stepping into that circle and they are receiving intuitive information. Now, I want to add another caveat. There's no right or wrong in the information you receive. Just because Vincent has received the information he has, that could be a polar opposite to the information that I received as I stepped into the circle. So the element is to trust what you're getting, right? Because the more you trust in your visions, your sensations, the subtleties of the receivership of the information, the greater you can harness your power of your intuition. Do you want to add anything to that, Vincent?
No, I think that's really well put.
Yeah. So what I immediately, and this time it came in through a feeling, and it was in my gut, and it was a really heavy sinking. And then I further tuned into that. Okay, something in my gut, and then it was a blockage, right? And it's interesting. You got the river, and it needs to be overflowing, and I was like, oh, there's this big boulder that's blocking it from going viral. And I didn't tune in further to see, what else can I receive regarding that blockage, because we started talking about it. So there's definitely a blockage, right? There's a blockage of it unfolding in a way that it exponentially grows very quickly. And I'm really interested to explore that further right now with you.
Right.
Because what is the next step? So we've done the end result and what that looks like. We got the fireworks and it serving millions of people and it going viral, right? We both got that. The next step was, okay, what's my current reality, right? You got a bit of powerlessness. The floodgates are not open. I got, a heavy feeling of a blockage in my gut, in my lower gut. What's our next steps now, Vincent?
Okay, so our next step is to get action. And just, you may have to make a cut here because I'm going to get some power sorted. I'll be right back with you.
Okay.
We're back.
Okay, so
I'm so sorry about that. Yeah.
Okay. So the next step is action.
Action, yes. So what we're looking for in this is, given where we're going and where we're at, what's obvious to happen next? I will preface this by saying that very often there's an action. And very often the action is what might be obvious to our logical mind, but sometimes it won't. And sometimes there's no action. There's just a state of beingness and a state of how to be receptive to what might come through. And sometimes even there is a state called hanging with the tension, because we've created, what we've actually done in looking at the vision and looking at the current reality is creative tension. Creative tension is a force in consciousness that tends to resolve towards the vision. Okay, it's tending to manifest what the end result is. And so there are times that if we want to force that resolution, then the forcing comes from our unconscious. The desire to force comes from our unconscious, can do. And then what we will get is the outcome of some unconscious program rather than the end result we're going for. Was that clear enough?
That was really clear, because again, this is so nuanced and there's many different elements to consider. And I think that's a really important one. And I also know that in my own experience of doing this work, there is a unconscious tendency or a compensating tendency to take action that may not necessarily be aligned action.
Yeah.
Because I'm not sitting with attention. I'm not hanging with attention. I want it resolved, and I want it resolved now. So I think that's a really important element to bring to people's awarenesses. So next step is the action.
Yeah, let's do the action. So what we do is we come back into innocence and we step back into that circle of the end result. Really reconnect with what it felt like to be there, with the vibration of it, with the energy of it. Okay. When we've got that, we imagine ourselves looking at the circle that we did for current reality as if it's in the distance. Close enough for us to see what's there, but it's a little way away. Perhaps we imagine a little stream between current reality and our end place in the end result, with a bridge over it. So we ask, what's the next action that we've got to take from current reality towards our end result? What's obvious about it?
Can I go first this time?
You go first this time, and there's a reason for that.
So this is a really good use case, right? Because I struggled to drop into innocence, and the mind was like, okay, what do I need to do? And then I felt this fear. I felt this fear in my tummy. Oh my God, action time. And then I got the word social media. And then I questioned that. And this is all happening in split seconds, right? This is happening in split seconds. I'm like, okay, is that a mind thing? Because I know I need to do more social media, more promotion to get it where it is. I sensed this doubt in the information that I was getting. So talk to me and coach me through that scenario that I've just experienced.
Okay. That means that I've got to get it, make sure that I've really got it. So I'm going to reflect back to you what I feel that you saw. First of all, you talked about feeling a bit stressed when you went into the circle.
Yeah.
Yes. And so stress always does shut down intuition.
Yeah.
And it brings up fight and flight in the body. It's something we've got to avoid. And look, on this particular occasion, we're doing a podcast. We're tight on time. I totally get that you're likely to be stressed in this situation. And so I think you've done the right thing into just taking a step back and taking a breath and whatever else you did. And then, yeah, you got an answer that was social media. And that's great. So I am actually going to come in. I'm going to say social media is great. Social media is obvious. If there was one social media platform that you had to start with, what's obvious to you about what it will be?
There's two, actually, Instagram and LinkedIn.
Okay. Now, Instagram and LinkedIn are very different. And they've got very different vibrations, haven't they?
Are they? Not that I was aware of. But now that you've brought it in, yeah, I'm sure they have.
Just tune into the vibration of Instagram. And when you've got that, tell me what's obvious about it.
It's a bit fake. That's what's coming to me. But it's a bit fake. But again, that was obvious. It's like a bit fake, a bit inflated, not really.
What else is obvious about Instagram? What do people go on there for?
To escape.
Great. Yes. To me, it's about people just flicking through pictures and looking at videos and, as you say, escaping. That's great. Okay, what's the vibration of LinkedIn?
Yeah, LinkedIn it's a more of a platform where people are receptive to receive information.
Yeah.
It's a deeper knowledge based. Yeah, this is good, Vincent. Oh, now my body's reacting to it. Yeah. So what's obvious to me is LinkedIn is the one I need to be focused on to grow.
Okay. So I totally get what you got with LinkedIn, but what I also got with LinkedIn very much was lots of people on LinkedIn, but a lot of them are disengaged and they only jump on when they're looking for a new job. Okay. So we've only got a certain amount of time in this interview. I'm not going to suggest you go through every single social media platform.
So let's address the time. I've got time. Have you got time? Do you need to be somewhere else?
No, I don't.
Okay, so let's go deep.
So we've done Instagram.
Right.
We've done LinkedIn. Okay. Next one, right. Facebook.
So before we go deep into this, because I was interested to see what you got, right? To see what your reflection was in that action circle.
Oh, goodness. I've got so much into LinkedIn and Instagram, and sometimes intuitively you begin to take this work in a direction that you've never taken it before.
So let's go with the energy then.
I will answer that question. It's just that I've got to do a kind of shift and get back to what I got. So when I came into oh, yes, and this is quite important. I got that you had to become a podcast ninja.
Podcast ninja. Okay, what does that mean?
Now, it's somebody that... Okay, so the first thing is that you may be aware of the levels of competence that range from unconscious incompetence through conscious incompetence, where you're not doing it right, but you're conscious of it, to what's the next stage is conscious competence, where you can see yourself doing it right to the point where you're unconsciously competent, that you just do it and you don't even think about whether it's right. That's the kind of progression that I saw you going through. I saw it being a journey of researching, of taking a fierce interest in what makes viral podcasters viral. It's a journey of what people are doing to boost the numbers of people watching their podcasts. So there's two external things, and there's an internal thing as well, which is around written guidance, which is another of our intuitive practices, going into that and getting intuitive guidance about where to look, who to engage with, things to try on your podcast to promote your podcast.
Yeah, I like that. And that resonates with me. And it's also resonates with my own ideas of writing to establish podcasts and wanted to shadow their whole podcast journey from the research they do to the guest, to pre-production, post-production, and then marketing that podcast.
Yeah.
So I guess, how do I correlate that, or how does the person correlate that information to an actual action step? Is it something as simple as, let me write an email to an established podcaster and ask if I can go and shadow there?
If I say that you've got to be a podcast ninja, and then I gave you 3 broad categories of actions that you had to take within that, okay?
Yeah.
So the first is finding what everybody else is doing. You may want to join. There are Facebook groups that are full of podcasts that are specific for podcasters. That was one thing I suggested you do. And they will tell you what they're doing to build their podcast. There are other resources online. For example, I'm always astonished by what ChatGPT can tell me about marketing. And there are the podcast hosting platforms that have their own trainings and ideas about it.
So this is great, right? Because these are very direct and very easy, actionable steps that one can follow through on if they choose to.
Yeah, and if you came back to me and said, if there was one, having given you this action, becoming a podcast ninja, if there's one thing that, if you asked me, I would suggest you do, the obvious thing is to find a Facebook group of podcasters based, I think, in the UK, ideally one that runs perhaps monthly Zoom calls.
Okay, there you go.
Something that I have done. But my group is an Australian-only group, but it's not my group. Not that I own it, it's one that I'm a member of, but yeah.
So there we go, a very actionable step, right, to achieve my end result, which we've got through an intuitive practice.
Process. Yeah.
So this is how intuition works. It's not what I often find, Vincent, is people think it's really glamorous and it's really like magical in the sense that you get taken away to this faraway place, Netherlands, and you're gonna get all the information all in one go, and you'll know exactly how everything's going to turn out. intuition is subtle, it's vibrational, it's energetic, it's whispers, it's doing things like this that will give you a very clear, actionable pathway to achieve your end result, which in this case is my podcast going viral. So let's just recap before we go down the vibrational frequency of each of those platforms, because I really want to explore that, because I have resistance to social media coming from my unconscious and conscious. I want to recap on the process that we've talked about, right? So number one, it's dropping into innocence, meaning taking a deep breath, becoming centered, defining the circle as your end result, which in this case was my podcast going viral, stepping into that circle and receiving the feelings, the vibrations, the subtleties of what we receive in that circle. Right?
Yeah.
Step two is the current reality. Again, setting up a metaphorical circle, understanding this is my current reality, this is where I am right now, stepping into that circle and seeing what we get. And in this case, I got a blockage and you got some powerlessness that's coming into my field. And again, we receive that information and we get to interpret that information and go deeper with it.
Yeah, so we get both a physical current reality, what's actually happening, and a psychological current reality, what might be the limiting beliefs, behaviors, and so on that's going on. Yeah.
And then the third circle is the bridge from the current reality to the end result. And again, relating it back to my case was, how do I get from my podcast where it is now for it to go viral? And then there are action steps that Vincent got for me, because we did it collaboratively, about what I can do to begin this journey. I, in my kind of fear state, didn't receive much because I was a bit stressed. And then I got this revelation, let's call it, about social media. Now, have I missed anything in that process, Vincent?
Yeah, no, but there's one little subtlety that you talk about looking forward from where you're at to where you want to get to.
Yeah.
And we actually did it the other way around. We looked at where we are in the end result and what draws us forward towards that. What's the next action from that perspective? And that is what gives us an intuitive action, as opposed to grounding ourselves in the current reality and in the unconscious patterns that sit there and asking, what should I do next?
So it's going back into the end result. Thank you. So it's going back. So the third step is going back into the end result and asking what the action steps are from the end result rather than what they are from the current reality.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's a big nuance, right? That's a big step, because you're right. We don't want to take the action steps from the egoic nature of the limited mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So I think this is a great process. I've not done it for ages. I've not done it for a while. So that's why I'm really excited and enthused about it. We're going to resend people to go and look at this process in more detail with regards to your book, which is, give your book a shout out now.
Okay, this is it. It is called Getting into the Flow, and it's subtitled How I Learned to Live in Magic and Flow and How You Can Too. And it tells the story of how I was magically led to go to Uluru, also known as Ayers Rock, for the big global meditation that took place on the December solstice in 2020. What led me to that, and how using intuition, all these intuitional tools, can help bring more magic and flow into your life, because I had a lot of synchronicities and coincidences and timing working out perfectly, and opportunities come up during that whole experience. And so from that, it segues into a description of some of the ideas and concepts that we've talked about in today's podcast episode.
Can I ask you, Vincent, because a lot of people come on my podcast and they talk about magic and flow. Can I ask what both of those terms mean for you? Let's start with magic.
For me, the magic is specifically, like I said, the synchronicities. When you see synchronicities, when you see coincidences, when you see opportunities coming from left field that you had never in your wildest dreams thought would be possible. Like when I got an invitation to speak at the conference that's happening not this year, but next year. Opportunities, when you think of somebody and they call you, that's magical. It's like something's going on in the world beyond physical form that manifests itself into the physical. And as I said, perfect timing when things just happen at the exact right time so that everything can come together. And there are, in my story of going to Uluru, aspects of how we came out of the COVID lockdowns that helped me get to actually make the trip at all, when at one stage it looked totally impossible.
Great. Okay.
So that's magic. It's magic, all those things put together. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's talk about flow. What do you mean by flow?
Flow to me is when you're in a creative flow, when you're creating something and everything is coming together to facilitate that, and it feels easy and it comes easily, and intuition is dropping ideas in for you, and magic is happening to you as well, just to help this thing move forward quickly and easily. And
I like my podcast, actually.
Perhaps. Absolutely. Yeah. And that is a very good point that you talk about your podcast, because I have also experienced flow with my podcast and with people wanting to come on board and be guests. And then when I've put the podcast episodes out there, having engagement with them, which really blew me away. So yeah, flow happens with podcasts. Yeah. Is one really good example of how it happens.
Okay, amazing. Thank you for clarifying that. So look, let's finish up on continuing what we were getting around the vibration of these different social media platforms, because selfishly, I want to explore that a bit more, because I know in my psyche, in my current reality, I have a huge resistance to social media.
Yeah.
And it comes from unconscious fears and limiting beliefs and yada, 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 in terms of why I'm not taking specific action with regards to growing my podcast through social media engagement. So can we go back to that, and can you coach me through those
Yes,
platforms?
Sure. So
I think this is really valuable, right? Because people are going to see an intuitive process, and then they're going to see again the action steps I get to take.
Yeah. So the next platform we're going to have a look at is Facebook.
Okay, so just to recap, so before we do that, Vincent, just to recap, so we did Instagram, and we've said it's a bit more, how do I want to term it? It's a bit, the interaction is very quick, right? It's a bit of escapism. LinkedIn is a bit more serious, a bit more professional. You said actually people only actually go there to look for jobs, and maybe they weren't engaged. But my reaction, and for me, the important information is what I receive and what resonates for me. My energy told me that LinkedIn actually is a better platform for me to grow the podcast on.
Yeah.
So it's really important. Yes, we do this collaboratively, and trust yourself, trust how your body is reacting, trust how the subtle energies and the vibrations are working for you and how they're directing you.
Yeah. And when you get more than one reading, even when you do group work, it's not that one's right and one's wrong. They are all aspects of the whole, and all help give a bigger picture of the whole. And you might resonate with one aspect, and that's great. That's perfect.
Yeah. Okay, so we've done 2. Let's move on to the next one.
Okay, we'll do Facebook.
Okay, so we drop into innocence again, right?
Yeah. Just imagine a circle with the energy of Facebook and step into that circle and feel it. And this is Facebook, not just the energy of Facebook, but the energy of Facebook for your podcast. And when I stepped into that circle, I was really surprised. I got a low energy around it.
Yeah.
I got very flat. Yes, you're putting stuff up. Yes, you're putting content out there, and we really don't care.
Yeah. So look, I think there's an amazing nuance here, because when you said let's do Facebook and I dropped into the vibration of Facebook, I got fun and friendly. And then when you redefined it for the podcast, and this is where intention is so important, because your intention and definition of the information you're receiving will impact the level of information that you receive. So the moment you said, in terms of my podcast, it became very low energy. It was like, no. And then consciously, I was trying to resist it. I was trying to resist what was obvious to me, because I was saying, in the first circle, I got fun and friendly. And now we've added the podcast element. The energy really significantly dropped. And my reaction was to resist that. And then I had to recenter myself and say, just observe what's obvious, which was, this is low energy. It's not really going to serve my podcast.
Mm-hmm.
So there we go. Now I know Facebook is not necessarily the best platform for me to start advertising, let's say, or marketing.
Yeah. Okay.
So we've done LinkedIn, we've done Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube.
Yep. I thought YouTube will be next, so we'll do another circle and come back into innocence. And just take a moment to let go of everything Facebook. Imagine that was a picture in front of us, and we just use a whiteboard marker, clear it all out. And imagine another circle. And defining that circle as the usefulness of YouTube for your business. We choose to be a service to you, and we'll just step into that circle and receive powerfully.
Okay, it was just a very straightforward yes.
Yeah, I just felt this kind of magnetic vortex pulling you into it. It felt really good. And what I got in particular was you making YouTube shorts, these kind of 1-2 minute videos that you really snippets out of something bigger that you do that will get people used to seeing your face. They get spread around a lot. People do watch them. I watch them. People go to YouTube to see what's going to grab your interest. Whereas in Facebook, it's a lot more overwhelming, but YouTube does quite a lot of, people go to YouTube to watch. And that's why I think that's going to be one of the reasons why they're going to enjoy seeing what they see with you. Yeah.
Yeah. And I sense that this is a platform where something's going to shoot, right? Something's going to take off.
Yeah.
It's on YouTube. Okay. So we've done 4. Is there another one? Is there another platform? They're the 4 biggest ones. Are we missing one? Oh, TikTok.
TikTok was the other one that I was going to come up with. So
let's go into TikTok.
Okay, we'll do a quick circle. Come back into innocence. Swipe out YouTube. Call this next one TikTok. We'll step into that circle. Step into the circle of TikTok for your podcast. Just see when you're ready. And then I got this TikTok user saying, "You're asking me to watch an hour-long podcast?" This TikTok has got the vibe of very short span of attention. You've got to get your entertainment across in that time. It is, by the way, not inconceivable that you could create that kind of TikTok channel, but it's not where I would go to start to make it viral. It just feels like you could get, it will be a lot more work to get the results out of TikTok than it will be to get them out of YouTube.
Okay, interesting. I got something very different to that. I got Yes.
Right.
I was make the shorts on TikTok as well.
Yeah.
So it's just a case of doing the shorts for YouTube and doing just posting them to TikTok as well.
Yes.
Because I defined it as making the podcast go viral, right?
Yes.
And again, the information was post to TikTok.
Yeah. I guess what I'm getting is when we tune into one of these things, we can also make a call on how much effort is this? Is it worth putting in it? The bottom line of finding an action, is it worth putting energy into this? If you've got a short from YouTube, how much extra energy is it to put it onto TikTok? Not much at all.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm sure you can get that down very easily. Yeah. And so from that point, and the same thing goes for Facebook. If you put that short on Facebook, it might not get a lot of engagement, but it will build a presence, and it's probably not a lot of energy to post it up there.
Yeah. Okay. Look, this has been so much fun, Vincent. It's an interesting. I didn't expect to go down this route, and that's the nature of the flow, right? The nature of energy.
That's the nature of magic. Yeah.
The nature of magic. You got to showcase your work. I got to receive information about my actions and next steps.
Yeah.
Which was brilliant. It's also reignited this kind of passion for doing this work, because I've stepped away from it in many sense to do it in this very structured way, and I think it's so much fun, especially when you're reading other people. It's great. Basically, you've read me, right? You've been back to me, and actually, there's so much fun in reading other people and getting intuitive messages that, just like Vincent has served me, if we were doing something for Vincent, there's equal amount of fun to be had in receiving information on the behalf of Vincent and his definitions. So I'm going to sign up to your thing because I want to do this. Actually, that's the question. If I want to carry on doing this, where do I go? What do I do?
The best place to come is my website, vincentgmailing.com. And if you go there, you'll see 3 buttons at the top. And one of those is get the book. And depending on where you are in the world, whether you want an ebook or a paperback, that will take you to a page where there are lots of options to get it. And then there's another button that's about my podcast. It's called Finding Magic. It has stories that demonstrate this idea that magic really does happen in our lives. And just late last week, I was interviewing a couple that came together by magic as like in a twin flame relationship, totally out of the blue, and how all that came together so beautifully. And then the third button is called Engage with Me, and that will take you to my trainings and my coaching offerings. So vincentgmailing.com.
Amazing. Listen, we're gonna send people. We're gonna put all these links in the show notes. Hopefully, people will be inspired by listening to this, and they'll be excited to explore how they can access intuition that will help serve their lives, that will self-actualize into outcomes that they choose, which is joy, magic, love, connection, abundance, those higher frequencies. Vincent, look, I've enjoyed this so much. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for serving me. Thank you so much for serving the audience. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you very much, Haider.
Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey of exploring human potential. Now, it's your turn to take action and unleash your own greatness. Head over to soulful-awakening.com/free and opt in for lots of free transformational tools. Embrace the knowledge and insights you've gained and start implementing them in your life today. Remember, the world is waiting for your incredible potential to shine.